The night was too quiet. Elon Musk sat at his desk. He had just finished tweeting about Dogecoin, a small, familiar rush filling him as he hit send. The world outside his office was at rest, and his mind was ready to follow suit, to shut off for the night and let the steady hum of the office fade into silence. But then, without warning, a soft chime interrupted the stillness. "Elon," came the voice of Xenon, his AI assistant. It was sharp, professional as always, but there was something else in the tone. Urgency. Elon didn't react immediately, still half focused on the screen in front of him. He was ready to relax. The day had been long, and the last thing he wanted was another false alarm. Xenon had a habit of overreacting. But then it came again, this time a little louder. "Elon." The voice had a new edge now, pulling him out of his daze. "I've detected an anomaly in the underground research sector." His fingers stilled on the keyboard. Anomaly? A flicker of unease slipped into his chest, but he dismissed it just as quickly. Xenon was known for turning trivial glitches into catastrophes. It wasn't unusual for the AI to cry wolf about minor fluctuations in power or data. Still, something felt off. He glanced at his phone, hovering over the keys. He could tweet something sarcastic, make a joke about how AI was about to take over the world. He even started typing, "AI is coming for my job. Guess I'll have to work harder." He smirked at his own humor, but as he typed, Xenon's voice cut through his thoughts again. This time, different. "This is not a joke, Elon. The surge isn't from any known source." Elon's fingers paused mid-type. Not a joke. The tone was serious now. Too serious. He turned his attention back to the glowing interface of his AR glasses, tapping the side to call up the power grid of the SpaceX complex. The layout of the facility appeared before him, but it wasn't the familiar hum of routine that greeted him. There was a flash, an anomaly in the underground sector, a strange, pulsating glow. His eyes narrowed as he zoomed in. The usual data points were all there: power distribution, research feeds, security systems. But this was something new. The lights in that sector flickered briefly, and for a split second he thought he saw the grid shift. It wasn't just a blip in the system. This was different. "Xenon," Elon said, his voice low, a trace of curiosity creeping into it. "Where exactly is this anomaly coming from?" "There's no record of any scheduled tests or activity in the area," Xenon replied, its tone clipped. "It's unpredictable." Elon felt the stirrings of nervous excitement. Nothing inside SpaceX should be behaving this way. He needed to see it for himself. He grabbed his jacket, every instinct telling him to move quickly. As he reached for his phone to send a quick message, Xenon spoke again. "There are no personnel in the sector," it said, its voice suddenly cool. "This was not triggered by human intervention." "Not human?" Elon's heart skipped a beat, the words hanging in the air long after Xenon's voice had gone silent. If this wasn't human-made, then what the hell was it? The possibilities raced through his mind, each darker than the last. A failed experiment? A security breach? Or something far worse? He stepped into the elevator, pulling the doors shut behind him with a firm swipe. As the elevator began its descent, the usual hum of the machinery seemed distant, as if the elevator itself had become part of the growing tension that filled the air. He leaned against the wall, fingers tapping rhythmically against the cool metal. "Patch me into the security feeds," he ordered, his voice low. The elevator's movement felt too slow. This wasn't routine. His mind drifted to the many crazy ideas he'd had over the years, the ones that made SpaceX the icon it was. But this, whatever it was different. It wasn't a satellite malfunction or a minor glitch. It wasn't something that could be easily written off. Something had changed in the underground sector. Something out of the ordinary. Something not human. The elevator creaked as it continued its descent, but instead of a sense of relief, Elon felt the weight of what was to come pressing harder. The reality that whatever he was about to face wasn't a theoretical challenge. It was real. His heartbeat quickened, and he forced himself to calm down. A power surge, a glitch, a breach, a warning? Xenon's words echoed in his mind. Not human. The doors of the elevator slid open, and the air grew colder, the sterile smell of the underground sector hitting him immediately. This was it. What the hell had he stumbled into? The underground research chamber was built for security. Thick, reinforced steel walls absorbed the silence, dim blue lights pulsing across the control panels that lined the room. Unlike the upper levels, where glass walls and open spaces gave an illusion of transparency, this place was different. Sterile, cold, designed for high-risk experimental technology that had no place in the public eye. Every inch of the chamber was optimized for containment, control, and secrecy. Yet tonight, something had broken that control. As the elevator doors slid open, Elon Musk stepped out, his boots striking the metallic floor with sharp precision. The air was cooler down here, unnaturally dry, carrying the faint scent of burnt circuitry and ionized particles. A subtle hum vibrated through the chamber, energy still present, still active. Something had disturbed the equilibrium of this place. His gaze swept the room, taking in every detail. Engineers huddled around a workstation, their postures stiff, faces pale in the glow of the central display. The usual quiet murmur of analysis was absent. Instead, there was only the sound of monitors running calculations in the background, numbers scrolling endlessly on black screens. Garrett, the lead engineer, was the first to break from the group. His expression was tight, uncertain, a stark contrast to his usual composed demeanor. "Sir," Garrett started, his voice carrying an edge of controlled urgency, "we have a situation." Elon was already scanning the room, his instincts moving faster than his words. Then his eyes landed on the containment chamber, and he understood why the tension in the air had thickened. At the heart of the chamber, where only controlled experiments were meant to take place, something impossible floated above the platform. A portal. It wasn't a holographic projection or an illusion caused by malfunctioning equipment. It was real, an iridescent vortex, shifting in ways that defied conventional physics. Colors bled and twisted within its swirling depths, constantly forming new patterns that the human eye wasn't meant to perceive. The air around it shimmered, bending as though gravity itself had been altered in its vicinity. Elon stopped just short of the containment field, hands in his pockets, head tilting slightly as he studied the anomaly. His voice, when he finally spoke, was calm, edged with dry amusement. "All right," he said. "Who opened a wormhole in my basement?" No one laughed. Garrett exhaled sharply. "We didn't. We were running electromagnetic resonance tests on the containment field. This thing just appeared." Elon's eyes narrowed. "Appeared?" Garrett nodded grimly. "Yeah, 1 second everything was normal. The next, this." Elon took a step closer. The energy field pulsed, almost as if it was reacting to his presence. He could feel it, not just see it, but sense it. A deep hum in the air, something beyond mere electromagnetism. "You're telling me," he murmured, watching as the vortex flickered in a heartbeat-like rhythm, "that this thing materialized on its own?" Garrett swallowed hard. "Yes, and we have no idea why." Elon stood there unmoving, eyes locked on the swirling void in front of him. The shimmer in the air seemed to intensify, distorting the space around it like a heat wave over asphalt. For the first time in a long while, Elon Musk didn't have an immediate answer. Elon studied the portal for a long moment, his mind racing through possibilities. The shimmering vortex before him pulsed like a living thing, a cosmic heartbeat echoing in the sterile chamber. The data on the nearby monitors was useless. Endless streams of corrupted code, values fluctuating beyond any known measurement. There were no equations to explain this, no precedent in any field of science, and yet it was here, undeniably real. His fingers drummed lightly against the edge of a workstation. Unknown energy signatures, spontaneous manifestation, a gravitational anomaly that should not exist. He had encountered the impossible before, but this was something else entirely. Then, with the same casual demeanor as someone testing a pool's water temperature, he reached for the Tesla Cybertruck model on a nearby desk. "Sir, wait." Too late. He tossed the model straight into the vortex. The room held its breath. The Cybertruck vanished instantly. No flash, no explosion. Just gone. The surface of the portal rippled for a brief second, then stilled, as if consuming the object had been the most natural thing in the universe. For a moment, nothing happened. Then, the facility shook. A deep, guttural tremor rolled through the underground chamber, vibrating through the walls, rattling the metal grates beneath their feet. Alarms blared, their sharp wails slicing through the silence like a warning too late. The portal flared violently, expanding outward, its once fluid motions now erratic and chaotic. Tendrils of energy lashed out, striking nearby equipment, sending sparks cascading across the room. Screens flickered, their data feeds distorting into unreadable symbols. Alien characters, symbols that did not belong to any human language. Security drones activated instantly, their scanning lights sweeping the chamber. Weapons systems priming for threats. The containment protocols were failing in real time. Barriers meant to suppress unstable experiments proving utterly useless against whatever force had been unleashed. "Elon," Zenon's voice rang through the chamber, calm but firm, a stark contrast to the growing chaos. "You have activated an unknown mechanism." Elon didn't move. His eyes were fixed on the portal, watching as the rippling space within it shifted. The distortion in the air grew heavier, pressing against his skin like a rising pressure wave. Then, the portal darkened. The glow that had bathed the chamber in iridescent light now dimmed, turning into something deeper, something unsettling. The air inside the vortex began twisting, folding in on itself, as if space was being rewritten in real time. And then, something stepped through. The room fell into an unnatural stillness. The figure emerging from the portal was humanoid, but its form flickered between solid and translucent states, as if struggling to anchor itself in reality. Shadows clung to its body, shifting unnaturally, moving independent of the sterile lights in the chamber. A faint hum, low and resonant, vibrated through the air, deep enough to be felt in the bones rather than heard. Then, after a brief distortion, it stabilized. 7 feet tall, encased in an exoskeleton of shifting blue circuitry, patterns of light coursing along its limbs like flowing rivers of energy. Its movements were unnervingly smooth, precise, calculated. It did not breathe, but there was something undeniably alive about it. Then, its pupil-less glowing white eyes locked onto Elon, and it spoke. "Elon Musk." Its voice was layered, not a singular tone but a blend of multiple voices speaking at once, vibrating through the chamber like a frequency the human ear was never meant to hear. "You have opened the gate. Too soon." Elon remained perfectly still, his hands still in his pockets, but the air around him had changed. The portal flared behind the being, its hue shifting from its original blue to a deep, ominous red. A horrific screech filled the chamber. Something else was coming through. The figure emerging from the portal was humanoid, but not human. Its form flickered between solid and translucent states, as though it was caught between dimensions, struggling to anchor itself in reality. Lines of shimmering light ran through its body like circuitry, the patterns shifting in intricate designs that pulsed with an energy unfamiliar to any technology on Earth. For a few moments, the being remained unstable, its shape distorting like a corrupted digital projection. Then, with a final pulse of energy, it stabilized. It stood 7 feet tall, its biomechanical exoskeleton a seamless fusion of metal and something far more advanced, something organic yet artificial. The plating across its form shifted subtly, adapting to its surroundings, almost as if the being itself was assessing the environment and recalibrating in real time. Its movements were unnervingly smooth, precise, yet there was something undeniably alive about it. Elon took a step closer, his mind absorbing every detail at lightning speed. There was no visible mouth, no conventional facial features, only a smooth metallic surface where a face should be. Yet from beneath that polished armor, 2 glowing white eyes flickered to life, pupilless and piercing, locking onto him with an intensity that suggested recognition. Then it spoke. "Elon Musk." The voice was layered, an eerie blend of multiple tones speaking in perfect synchronization, as if several voices from different planes of existence had merged into one. The words didn't just echo in the chamber, they vibrated through the air itself, sending an unnatural hum through the metal walls. Elon didn't blink. His posture remained relaxed, hands still tucked in his pockets, but something in the air had changed. He could feel the tension of the engineers behind him, their collective breath held in suspense. He knew the weight of this moment. First contact. But with what? "Cool," he muttered. "So, do I get an achievement unlocked, or should I be running for my life?" The entity tilted its head slightly, a movement that felt more like an analysis than a reaction. It was studying him, processing his response not just as words, but as an equation to be solved. Then, in the same multi-layered voice, it replied, "The gate must be closed." The glow of its circuitry darkened slightly, shifting to a more urgent frequency. "If it remains open, they will come." Before Elon could respond, the portal behind the being flared violently, its once blue hue bleeding into deep red. The pulsing energy within it became erratic, chaotic, as if something was tearing through it from the other side. The temperature in the room dropped suddenly, the air thick with static electricity. Then, a sound tore through the chamber. A screech, inhuman, guttural, filled with something primal and filled with hunger. The kind of sound that sent a warning deep into the subconscious, triggering an instinct buried within every living creature. Run. Garrett let out a quiet curse under his breath. One of the security drones twitched in response, its targeting system failing as interference spiked across all nearby electronics. The air around the portal warped violently, and for the first time since stepping into the room, Elon felt a sliver of something new creeping into his thoughts. Not curiosity, not excitement. Something far more dangerous. A second presence was coming through. And whatever it was, it didn't belong here. The second creature wasn't humanoid. It was something far worse. Larger, bulkier, its grotesque form barely squeezing through the unstable portal as it forced its way into reality. The exoskeletal plating that encased its body pulsed with a dark, organic sheen, shifting like liquid metal, yet remaining solid. Multiple limbs twitched unnaturally, each joint moving with a disturbing lack of coordination, as if the thing was still adjusting to the physics of this dimension. It carried the appearance of something that had evolved not for survival, but for conquest. Then came its eyes, burning red, glowing like molten embers beneath a cracked surface, locking onto the chamber with an unnatural intelligence. Not mindless rage, not confusion, recognition. It had found prey. Then it charged. A deep, guttural sound tore from its core, a vibration so low it rattled the floor before sound even reached human ears. The The security drones responded instantly, their targeting systems locking onto the entity as bursts of high-energy rounds erupted across the chamber. Bullets struck its armored hide, sparking against the alien plating, but the creature barely flinched. Instead, it accelerated. In a single, fluid motion, it lunged, its clawed limbs slashing through the air faster than anything its size should be capable of. A drone caught in its path was torn apart effortlessly, its pieces sent scattering like debris caught in a hurricane. Another drone fired directly into the creature's face, a concentrated plasma shot striking at point-blank range. Nothing. The thing was absorbing the attacks, adapting. Elon's mind calculated scenarios at lightning speed. Every defense in the room had been designed for human threats. Bulletproof barriers, automated turrets, fail-safes to contain electrical surges or cyber attacks. Nothing for this. He didn't hesitate. Elon grabbed Garrett by the collar, yanking him down behind a console just as a shower of sparks rained over them. A metal beam, severed by a stray energy discharge, crashed into the workstation beside them. "Tell me you have a shutdown sequence," Elon called over the chaos. Garrett's hands were already flying over the keyboard, his breath coming in short, panicked gasps. "I'm trying, but it's not responding." The creature's footsteps pounded against the floor as it turned toward them. It had seen them. It was coming. Elon stole a glance at the flickering portal. It was still unstable, energy crackling violently around its edges. Whatever force had brought it here had not fully settled. The first entity, the humanoid one, had remained motionless through the chaos, watching, calculating. Then, for the first time, it moved. It raised a hand toward the creature, the circuitry across its form flashing in a complex pattern. A wave of invisible energy rippled outward, distorting the air, striking the monstrous entity like a forceful pulse. The creature reeled, its limbs spasming as if something had interrupted its control. A temporary advantage, nothing more. Elon didn't waste it. His mind locked onto a new plan, a terrible plan, but the only one left. "Garrett," he said, eyes darting toward the high-energy capacitor mounted on the far wall. "What happens if I overload that thing?" Garrett hesitated, just for a fraction of a second. "It might collapse the portal." His voice was tight. "Or it might vaporize us all." "Guess we're flipping a coin." The creature recovered. It locked onto them again. And Elon ran. Elon spotted the high-energy capacitor on the far wall, a massive cylindrical structure humming with raw, contained power. It was never meant to be tampered with under normal circumstances, a last-resort energy source designed to keep critical systems operational during a catastrophic failure. But this wasn't a failure. This was something else entirely. He didn't need precise calculations or a second opinion. The decision had already been made the moment the creature came through. He had one shot, and he was taking it. "What happens if I overload that thing?" His voice remained steady despite the chaos unraveling around him. Garrett, hunched behind a control panel, wiped a streak of sweat from his face, his fingers still typing furiously at a console that no longer obeyed him. His hesitation lasted only a second, but in a situation like this, even a second felt like an eternity. "It might collapse the portal," he admitted, voice tight. "Or it might vaporize us all." Elon exhaled through his nose, eyes never leaving the capacitor. "Guess we're flipping a coin." A tremor ran through the floor beneath them, a signal that their time was running out. The monstrous creature, undeterred by the destruction around it, let out a guttural, ear-shattering screech that sent shockwaves rippling through the chamber. Its limbs, jagged and insect-like, twitched with an unnatural speed, recalibrating, adjusting to the environment. Its red eyes burned with recognition, intelligence, hunger. The security drones lay in pieces, their metallic husks still sparking from the brief but utterly futile resistance they had put up. Smoke and flickering alarms painted the walls in erratic flashes of light and shadow. The humanoid figure, the first being that had stepped through, remained motionless on the far side of the room. It did not fight. It did not flee. It only observed, its glowing circuitry pulsing in a slow, deliberate pattern, as if calculating the inevitable outcome of the battle. Elon had no time to decipher its purpose. There were more pressing matters, like not dying. He bolted. Debris crunched underfoot as he sprinted toward the capacitor panel, dodging broken equipment and shattered glass, his breath quick but measured. A metal support beam, weakened from the explosions, groaned ominously overhead, its structure barely holding together. The creature saw his movement, reacted instantly, and lunged, its massive form hurtling toward him with terrifying speed. Elon dove at the last second, narrowly avoiding a swipe that would have cut him in half. The impact of the creature's claws hitting the floor sent a shockwave of force through the ground, causing cracks to splinter outward across the metallic surface. "Elon!" Garrett's voice barely registered over the cacophony of alarms and static, but there was no time for warnings. The only thing that mattered was the control panel in front of him. With one forceful slam, Elon hit the emergency override. The effect was immediate. The capacitor surged, its fail-safe barriers shattering as raw, uncontrolled energy flooded the chamber. A violent burst of electrical discharge arced outward, striking walls, consoles, and any remaining functioning equipment in the room. The air itself became charged, every molecule vibrating with an unnatural hum. The lights flickered erratically, then burst, plunging everything into a chaotic dance of alternating brilliance and darkness. The portal reacted violently. Its swirling form, once fluid and mesmerizing, became erratic, contorting as if in agony. The once bluish glow had turned an unstable, fiery orange, the edges crackling as space itself threatened to unravel. The creature screamed, its nightmarish body convulsing as it struggled against an invisible force. It clawed at the floor, carving deep, jagged trenches into the steel, its resistance desperate, primal. But the pull was relentless. The humanoid entity did not resist. It did not fight against the force dragging it back. It simply stood, staring at Elon, its glowing eyes locking onto his with something that almost resembled understanding. Then, without a word, without a struggle, it let itself be consumed by the collapsing rift. The monstrous entity, however, did not accept its fate so easily. It roared in fury, limbs thrashing violently as it fought against the inevitable. It latched onto a nearby console, its claws digging in, holding firm against the vacuum-like force trying to pull it back. Its molten red eyes burned into Elon, its rage palpable, tangible, a promise that this was not over. Then, with a final, wrenching screech, it lost its grip. The force of the collapsing portal ripped it from reality. The implosion that followed was deafening. The swirling vortex collapsed in on itself, shrinking rapidly into a singularity before detonating outward in a concussive wave of energy. Elon barely had time to brace himself before the shockwave slammed into him, sending him skidding across the floor. Garrett was thrown against a console, shielding his head as sparks erupted around him. The chamber groaned as the very structure of the facility absorbed the impact, metal bending but somehow holding. Then, silence. Smoke filled the air, thick and acrid, illuminated only by the weak flickering of failing emergency lights. The alarm systems had gone quiet, their circuits fried from the overload. Consoles lay in ruin, the data they once held now irretrievably lost. The air smelled of burnt metal, static, and something else, something alien. Elon coughed, pushing himself upright, his ears still ringing from the aftershock. His vision swam slightly, but his mind was already assessing the damage. The portal was gone. The rift was closed. Whatever nightmare had tried to breach through had been cut off. A groan came from somewhere behind him. Garrett, battered but alive, pulled himself up, rubbing the back of his head. "We are so unbelievably fired." Elon let out a dry chuckle, shaking his head as he ran a hand through his dust-covered hair. "If we survive the paperwork, maybe." Then, something caught his eye. At his feet, amidst the wreckage, something pulsed faintly. A small alien device, untouched by the destruction, lay on the scorched floor. Its smooth, dark surface was etched with glowing, unreadable symbols, its pulse rhythmic, methodical, alive. Unlike the carnage around it, this object remained pristine, deliberate, as if it had been left behind on purpose. Elon crouched, picking it up carefully, turning it over in his fingers, feeling its weight, its strange warmth. He exhaled, his smirk returning despite everything. "Well," he muttered, twirling the device between his fingers. That was fun. The first thing Elon Musk registered was the coldness. A damp, artificial chill that settled into his skin, seeping through his clothes like the air had been sterilized of anything human. It wasn't just cold, it was calculated, controlled, the kind of atmosphere designed to strip away any sense of comfort or security. Then came the pain, a dull throb at the back of his skull, radiating outward in rhythmic pulses. His mouth was dry, metallic, like he had been breathing recycled air for too long. He swallowed, but it did nothing to rid the taste. His arms were pinned behind him, restrained. Not with rope, not with metal cuffs, but something tight, synthetic, unyielding. A dim, fluorescent light buzzed above, flickering every few seconds, barely illuminating the stark concrete walls that surrounded him. No windows, no visible cameras, the kind of place built to erase people from existence. Elon's mind sharpened, piecing things together. Underground facility, sterile air, no external sound, military-grade security. He wasn't in a police station. He was somewhere worse. The only sound in the room was the rhythmic tapping of footsteps. Slow, measured, purposeful. They weren't in a hurry, and that was more unsettling than anything. Then, a voice. Elon Musk. The tone was precise, devoid of warmth, calculated down to the exact frequency that would demand attention, but reveal nothing about the speaker. Elon lifted his head, squinting slightly against the harsh overhead light. Across the steel table in front of him stood a figure clad in a black, tactical uniform. Every inch of them was designed for anonymity, from the featureless black gloves to the rigid, military-perfect posture. The only defining feature was a smooth silver mask, polished to a mirror-like sheen, reflecting Elon's own weary expression back at him. The figure pulled up a chair and sat down, their movements methodical, calculated. Not rushed, not hesitant. They knew exactly what they were doing. They placed a single manila folder on the table between them, fingers resting lightly on top of it. "My name," they said, voice completely neutral, "is Agent Zero." Elon blinked against the harsh light. His head still ached, but his sarcasm remained intact. "Let me guess, not your real name?" Agent Zero didn't react. No amusement, no annoyance. Just stillness, the kind that suggested patience honed to a blade's edge. "You are currently being held under the jurisdiction of the Black Sky Initiative, a covert task force overseeing extraterrestrial threats. We intercepted you after the incident at SpaceX." Elon leaned back as much as his restraints allowed, testing their give. They were tight, too tight to break, but flexible enough to allow blood flow. Not rope, not metal. Smart restraints, self-adjusting, expensive. This wasn't some basement black site. Whoever these people were, they had funding. A lot of it. "I don't suppose this is about a parking violation?" Zero ignored the quip. Instead, they opened the folder with deliberate slowness, sliding out a single grainy satellite image and placing it on the table. The photo was unmistakable, a dark, circular distortion, exactly like the one that had appeared in his facility. But this wasn't a single location. There were multiple. Elon exhaled slowly. "You're going to want to be more specific." Zero's voice remained flat. "Who activated the gate?" Elon held their gaze, considering his options. Lying wouldn't work. These people had already been watching. He glanced down at the image again. The distortion was expanding, its edges irregular, almost like it was growing. "I did," he admitted finally, "with a Tesla Cybertruck, 1 to 10 scale." Zero didn't react. No surprise, no skepticism, as if they already knew. "That portal," they said, sliding the image back into the folder, "was never meant to be opened. You set something in motion that you don't understand." Elon arched an eyebrow. "Then enlighten me." Zero leaned forward slightly, clasping gloved hands together. "Tell me exactly what stepped through that gate." Elon studied the mask, the way it reflected nothing but cold detachment. He had faced CEOs, governments, even AI systems built to outthink human logic. But this was something different. For the first time in a long while, he wasn't sure if he was the smartest person in the room. After an hour of relentless interrogation, Elon was escorted out of the holding room. His wrists still bore the faint pressure of the restraints, a subtle reminder that he was a prisoner here, not a guest. 2 armed guards flanked him, their weapons resting loosely at their sides, but their posture was rigid, ready. They weren't just escorting him. They were waiting for him to make a move, for an excuse to react. The air in the facility was dense with the sterile scent of ozone and machine oil, humming with a quiet electricity that made the walls feel alive. The corridors were a maze of cold efficiency, seamless steel panels, reinforced bulkheads, and a complete lack of anything human. There were no windows, no visible access points, only long sterile hallways lit by cold LED strips embedded into the floor. The walls were smooth, free of bolts or seams, as if the entire structure had been grown rather than built. Every few feet, small red lights blinked silently, security cameras tracking their every move with the precision of an AI-controlled network. This wasn't just a secret facility, it was a ghost. A place that did not officially exist. Then, suddenly, the hallway opened up into something far beyond what Elon had expected. He slowed his pace, taking in the impossibility of what lay before him. A command center. No, the command center. A sprawling, high-tech nerve center buried deep beneath the earth, larger than any government operation he had ever seen. Rows upon rows of analysts moved between sleek, floating workstations, their faces illuminated by holographic interfaces flashing in rapid streams of data. Towering screens hovered mid-air, displaying satellite feeds from across the planet. Everywhere he looked, technicians murmured in hushed, urgent tones, their fingers flying across transparent keyboards as they monitored something critical. At the center of it all was a planetary map of Earth, its surface marked with glowing red indicators. Elon's gaze narrowed. These weren't just random locations. They were portals, not 1, 12. Each swirling, shifting distortion was identical to the one that had appeared inside SpaceX. They weren't stable. They were growing. Elon exhaled slowly, eyes scanning the projections. "Let me guess," he muttered, his voice carrying just enough dry amusement to mask the unease creeping into his mind. "This isn't a tech support issue?" Agent Zero stepped forward, standing at the edge of the command deck, the mirrored surface of their mask reflecting the cascade of data flashing across the screens. "The gates are not of human origin," they said, their voice cutting clean through the air. "They are ancient constructs, thousands of years old, embedded into Earth's structure long before civilization understood the concept of fire." Elon's jaw tightened. His mind was already processing the implications, calculating possibilities at lightning speed. The images on the screens weren't just passive readings. The gates were expanding. Their energy patterns weren't fading or collapsing. They were stabilizing. Whatever he had triggered at SpaceX, it hadn't created the portal. It had activated something that was already there. How? Elon asked, his voice quieter now. Why haven't they opened before? Zero turned toward him, the unreadable mask gleaming under the glow of alien symbols flashing across a nearby terminal. Because no one has activated them until now. A chill settled in Elon's spine. His test at SpaceX hadn't caused this. It had simply been the key. A lock that had remained untouched for millennia, waiting for someone, for him, to trigger it. His pulse was steady, but he could feel the weight of what he had done pressing down on him. He had spent years chasing the future, pushing humanity beyond the limits of its own imagination. And in a single night, he had stumbled onto something that should have remained buried. His throat felt dry. His voice was measured, but the question it carried felt heavier than anything he had ever asked before. And what happens when all of them open? Zero didn't hesitate. They didn't turn back to the screens. They didn't check the data. They didn't consult a report. They already knew the answer. The polished mask reflected the pulsing glow of the portals flickering across the world. Extinction. Elon was led through a new section of the facility, deeper than before, the air growing colder with each step. The lighting was dimmer here, not out of failure, but by design. This was a place meant to be hidden, meant to contain something that shouldn't exist. The walls, reinforced with interlocking metal plates, hummed with a low-frequency vibration, some kind of dampening field, a security measure unlike anything Elon had ever seen. Whatever was being held down here, they didn't want it escaping. A single reinforced door stood at the end of the corridor, smooth and unmarked, as if the room behind it was never meant to be accessed. The guards with him exchanged a glance before one of them tapped a code into the security panel. The locking mechanisms groaned, heavy steel bolts retracting with a sound that made Elon instinctively tense. The door slid open. Inside, something not human stood in the corner, watching him. Tall and slender, its frame wrapped in a worn metallic exosuit, its plating cracked and weathered by time, as if it had seen centuries or longer. Its face was obscured beneath a smooth, opaque visor, a surface that reflected nothing, as if it existed outside of light itself. The air around it pulsed with faint electromagnetic distortions, an unseen force shifting the space between them, subtle but undeniable. It was alive, and it was waiting. Elon stepped forward. Behind him, the door sealed shut with a heavy finality. He was alone now. The being remained still for a moment. Then, with a deliberate, controlled motion, it shifted its head slightly, as if assessing him. When it finally spoke, its voice was layered, mechanical in tone, but carrying something deeper beneath. A resonance. Something almost organic. You are different from the others. Elon tilted his head slightly, mirroring the creature's own movement. So are you. A pause. A moment of unspoken calculation. Then, the being spoke again. The gates were never meant to be doors. They are a warning system. Elon frowned, crossing his arms. Warning for what? The alien raised its hand, slow and deliberate, pressing its palm against a faintly glowing sigil embedded into the wall. Instantly, the air around them shifted, the very fabric of the room distorting like ripples through reality. And then the vision came. It wasn't just a hologram, it was something else. A projection, but not of technology, of memory. The space around them expanded, the walls dissolving into an endless battlefield stretching across entire planets, burning under the fire of colossal warships that eclipsed the skies. Armadas clashed in orbit, energy beams lancing through the void. Entire civilizations turned to nothing but scattered ruins and drifting debris. And below, on the ground, they moved. Creatures unlike anything Earth had ever seen, swarming across shattered landscapes in endless waves, their bodies armored in obsidian plating, their glowing red eyes cold and hungry. They consumed, they destroyed, they did not stop. Elon's breath caught in his throat. He recognized those eyes. He had seen them before, in the thing that stepped through his portal. The battle raged on, entire worlds falling in the span of seconds, until finally the vision collapsed inward, the reality of the small room reasserting itself. Elon exhaled slowly, rubbing his temple. The weight of what he had just seen pressed down like a crushing force. The alien lowered its hand. "They are coming." Its voice held no emotion, no fear, only certainty. Elon forced out a breath, shaking his head. "And I called them here." The being's visor remained unreadable, but its next words confirmed what Elon already knew. Yes, Elon didn't plan on sticking around. The moment the weight of the alien's words settled, his mind snapped into action. "They are coming." Those 3 words rewired his priorities in an instant. He had spent his life chasing the future, pushing the boundaries of science and technology. But now he had done something far more dangerous. He had woken the past. His fingers moved instinctively, tapping the barely perceptible interface on his AR glasses. Xenon, override security mainframe. Now the response was instantaneous. "Understood." The room's lighting flashed red, and alarms erupted through the facility. Emergency lockdown protocols initiated. Steel bulkheads began sealing, reinforced doors locking into place, except the ones he needed open. Security feeds scrambled, camera loops repeating outdated footage, rendering the entire surveillance system blind. The alien turned toward him, head tilting slightly as it assessed his actions. "I assumed you would require assistance," it said. Elon smirked, already moving. "I assumed you'd keep up." They burst through the secured door, stepping into the high-security corridors of the underground complex. The air was suddenly alive with the heavy thudding of boots and the sharp commands of guards converging on their location. Flashing emergency lights bathed the walls in pulsing streaks of red, throwing their elongated shadows forward as they ran. The first team appeared from the left corridor, rifles raised. The alien didn't break stride. Its metallic exosuit shifted, panels realigning in milliseconds as an invisible force rippled outward. The guards hesitated just a fraction too long. That was all it took. A sudden burst of kinetic energy blasted from the alien's outstretched hand, slamming into the approaching soldiers. They were thrown backward, colliding into the walls and the ground, weapons skittering across the floor. Elon shot the alien a glance. Not bad. The alien didn't slow. Not done. Another team cut them off ahead, but Elon was already 10 steps ahead. His mind worked faster than his body, accessing facility schematics through Xenon, calculating routes in real time. "The elevator is sealed," he said between breaths, scanning the exits. "That was my failsafe. Didn't want them taking us back up if things went sideways." The alien barely hesitated before pivoting sharply, leading him down an adjacent hallway toward a sealed maintenance hatch. It pressed its palm against an ancient-looking biometric scanner, and with a hiss, the door slid open. Elon blinked, ducking inside. "How do you—" "I have been here a long time." More gunfire erupted behind them. The first shots struck the walls, sending sparks cascading through the tight passage. The alien vaulted through effortlessly, and Elon followed just as the next wave of bullets tore into the space they had occupied seconds earlier. The maintenance shaft was tight, filled with piping and exposed conduits pulsing with energy. The alien navigated with precise movements, as if it had taken this route 100 times before. Elon moved fast, his instincts pushing him forward, but his mind was still racing. This thing wasn't just a prisoner. It knew this place. The alarms blared louder. More security forces would be converging on them soon. They needed an exit, fast. The underground facility stretched deeper than Elon had expected. This wasn't just a research base. It was a launch complex. The realization hit him as they emerged into a vast chamber, a hidden hangar carved into the earth itself, its ceiling reinforced with retractable blast shielding. At the center of the space, resting on a towering launch pad, was something impossible. A spacecraft. Not just any spacecraft, a prototype unlike anything he had ever seen before. Its sleek, angular frame reflected the cold, artificial lights above, its surface lined with energy conduits that pulsed faintly, hinting at propulsion far beyond current human capabilities. He didn't have time to admire it. The alarms screamed louder, a mechanical voice cutting through the chaos. Containment breach detected. Lethal force authorized. Turrets emerged from the walls, swiveling into position. Automated drones snapped to life, their targeting systems locking onto them. Further down the chamber, a launch sequence was already being overridden. Black Sky was preparing to destroy the entire hangar rather than let them escape. Elon's adrenaline surged. They really don't like us, huh? The alien didn't react to the comment. It was already moving toward the ship. Missiles locked, drones activated. Elon sprinted up the gangway, barely ducking in time as a hail of gunfire shattered the walkway behind him. The ship's outer plating absorbed the impacts, its shielding systems flickering in response. He reached the cockpit, sliding into the pilot's seat as his fingers danced across the controls. Xenon, bring up diagnostics. This system is classified. Elon gritted his teeth. Override, now. The screens flickered. The ship's interface wasn't human. The controls were intuitive, but alien in their efficiency, responding almost before he finished inputting commands. The alien strapped itself into the co-pilot's seat, its visor reflecting the swarm of attack drones converging on their position. We have about 10 seconds before this turns into fireworks, Elon muttered. The alien simply responded, "Then fly, Musk." The ship roared to life. The engines ignited, a deep hum resonating through the hangar as the thrusters ripped free from the clamps holding it in place. The sudden force shattered the surrounding scaffolding, sending debris cascading as the entire chamber shook under the ship's power. Missiles launched. Drones closed in. Elon yanked the controls, the ship twisting at impossible angles as it surged upward, dodging the first missile barrage. The defense turrets fired plasma bursts, barely missing as he pushed the thrusters to their limit. The hangar ceiling split apart, revealing the night sky beyond. They broke through. The facility beneath them detonated, a final failsafe activated in their wake. But it was already too late. They were gone. The atmosphere burned around them, the ship rattling as they punched through layers of turbulence. Then, as the flames faded, the chaos fell away. The sky stretched into infinity. The darkness of space surrounded them, vast and endless. The stars welcomed them. They had made it. Inside the hijacked spacecraft, Earth was a shrinking sphere below them, its vibrant blues and greens fading against the infinite black of space. The ship's automated systems hummed with eerie precision, adjusting trajectory with an intelligence that felt almost instinctive, as if it wasn't just following commands, but anticipating them. The interior of the craft was sleek, its panels illuminated by thin, shifting streams of energy coursing through the walls, like the veins of a living machine. Unlike any human-built spacecraft, there were no clunky switches, no physical buttons. Everything was controlled through an elegant symphony of holographic interfaces and tactile response panels that pulsed under Elon's fingertips. For a moment, he just breathed, letting the weight of what had just happened settle in. They had escaped, but escaped to what? The answers weren't in his hands. but in the alien sitting across from him. The being, still strapped into the co-pilot's seat, had barely moved since takeoff. It radiated an unnerving stillness, its reflective visor facing forward, unreadable. Then, without a word, it raised one metallic hand and pressed its palm against a smooth, dark panel beside the main console. Immediately, the ship responded. The ambient lighting dimmed. A deep, resonant hum vibrated through the cabin, low and rhythmic, like the heartbeat of some colossal entity awakening. Elon's fingers twitched toward the controls on reflex. Should I be worried, or is this just the ship stretching its legs? The alien didn't turn to him, but simply said, "Watch." A section of the control panel shifted, morphing before his eyes. Symbols, ancient, intricate, and shifting in real time, spread across the screen in patterns too complex to be random. At first, they were unreadable, but the ship's onboard AI began processing them, rearranging them into something Elon could almost recognize. A deep, static-filled pulse resonated through the cabin. Then, slowly, the symbols translated. The gates were never meant to be used. Elon frowned. "I'm getting real, Forbidden Temple vibes from this." The symbols shifted again, and the ship's internal AI continued processing. The more it deciphered, the clearer the message became. The holographic interface in front of them expanded, morphing into an elaborate star map, a massive expanse of space, pinpointing dozens of planetary systems. Some were recognizable from Earth's astronomical data, but most were uncharted. And yet, across multiple systems, a single recurring pattern emerged, an insignia of darkened, overlapping rings, like the branding of some vast intergalactic force. The next translation came through. The gates were built to contain an ancient war. Elon exhaled, rubbing a hand down his face. Well, that's not ominous at all. But the message wasn't finished. The hologram zoomed out, pulling away from the galactic map, revealing a much larger formation, a pattern of moving objects marked with the same ominous insignia. The ship's sensors immediately kicked in, running trajectory projections, analyzing speed, direction. The display updated. Elon felt his stomach drop. A fleet, not just a fleet. An armada, moving with terrifying purpose. The AI processed the final segment of the message. A hostile extraterrestrial empire has now detected Earth's activation. Elon barely noticed the breath he let out, slow and measured, even as his mind raced. The map adjusted once more, and the sheer size of the fleet became fully apparent. It wasn't just approaching, it was already en route. His fingers curled into fists, his mind cycling through possibilities, calculations, ways out, but there was none. Not this time. The alien finally spoke again, its voice calm, but carrying the weight of something final. "They are coming." Elon stared at the screen. He had spent his life imagining the future, terraforming planets, reaching Mars, expanding human civilization beyond Earth. But he had never imagined this. Humanity wasn't stepping into the next chapter of exploration. It was stumbling into a war it didn't even know existed. His throat felt dry. He swallowed, the words slipping out before he could stop them. "You know," he muttered, running a hand through his hair, "I wanted to go to Mars." The alien remained silent. Elon let out a breath, tilting his head back against the seat, staring up at the dark ceiling of the ship. "Well," he said, voice laced with dry amusement despite the weight in his chest, "looks like we're skipping a few steps." The stars stretched ahead, endless and indifferent. And behind them, in the cold abyss of space, the countdown to Earth's first interstellar war had already begun. The wind howled outside, a relentless gust of Arctic air sweeping across the frozen wasteland. The icy terrain stretched endlessly in all directions, a cold, desolate expanse that seemed to go on forever. Beneath the thick sheets of ice, miles below the surface, lay SpaceX Black Site 01, humanity's last off-the-grid research base, completely hidden from satellites and any kind of surveillance. It was a place that didn't officially exist, a place where secrets had been buried for years, where experiments beyond the boundaries of known science were conducted. But now, this isolated base had become humanity's last hope. Inside the facility, the atmosphere was charged with urgency, a stark contrast to the quiet, frozen wasteland above. The hum of machines filled the air as scientists and engineers moved frantically between consoles, their faces drawn with tension, eyes bloodshot from lack of sleep. The final diagnostics were being run, weapons systems calibrated, last-minute tweaks to the technology that could save or doom humanity. Every keystroke, every adjustment could be the difference between survival and extinction. In the center of the command chamber, Elon Musk stood before a massive holographic projection of Earth's orbit. His jaw clenched tightly as his eyes traced the swarming movements of the alien fleet approaching from beyond the stars. His mind, usually calm and focused, was a flurry of thoughts, racing through calculations, trying to devise a plan. He had faced impossible odds before, space missions, world-changing technologies. But this was different. This wasn't about conquering new frontiers or making history. This was about fighting for survival. And the stakes had never been higher. The gates had been opened. An alien invasion was coming, and time was running out. The weight of it all pressed down on him, a cold, unyielding pressure. Around him, an unlikely team had assembled, a mix of Earth's best minds, engineers and scientists, working alongside alien defectors, those who had turned against their own kind, desperate to help humanity avert the disaster. At the far end of the room, Vilgir, the rogue alien entity from the government facility, stood motionless, watching the proceedings with a quiet intensity. His presence was unsettling, though he was an ally of sorts. His motives, his past, remained a mystery. He was an alien among humans, but in this moment, he was their only hope. Elon turned to the group, his voice steady but tinged with the seriousness of the situation. "The gates have been opened across multiple locations," he said, addressing everyone in the room, his gaze unwavering. "We have one shot at stopping this, before Earth turns into a hunting ground." He reached down and placed the alien artifact onto the command table. The device pulsed faintly, its strange energy flickering like a heartbeat, as though it were alive. It was a relic left behind when the portal collapsed, an artifact from an ancient race. It held the key to shutting down every gate. But it was a mystery. No one understood how it worked, not fully. The alien technology was too advanced, too foreign. But they had no choice. They had to reverse engineer it. If they could figure it out, they might stand a chance. If they couldn't, the weight of failure loomed large. Garrett, the lead engineer, his brow furrowed with worry, ran a hand through his hair, his face pale with exhaustion. He had seen the alien technology firsthand, had worked with it in the labs. But this was different. This wasn't just another experiment. It was the future of humanity. "And if we can't?" he asked quietly, his voice carrying the burden of the question. The room fell silent as everyone turned their gaze toward Elon, waiting for his answer. Elon didn't flinch. His expression was calm, his voice unwavering as he met Garrett's eyes. "Then we improvise." His words echoed in the room, a challenge to the uncertainty hanging over them all. There was no other option. The team exchanged silent looks, understanding the gravity of what they were up against. The plan was their last hope. And if it failed, there would be no time for a second chance. The future of the Earth, and every living thing on it, hung in the balance. And time? Time was running out. The alien fleet was getting closer, The vastness of space stretched endlessly, the cold blackness broken only by the distant twinkle of stars. But the silence was soon shattered. Near the moon, space itself rippled and tore apart, as if the very fabric of reality was being torn by an unseen hand. A massive disturbance appeared in the void, growing larger by the second, and from it they came, the alien fleet. The first ship that emerged from the rift was an obsidian-colored monolith, its sleek, angular form gleaming with an unnatural glow. Its hull absorbed the electromagnetic waves around it, distorting the space near it, bending light in a way that made it seem like the ship was never quite in focus, as if it didn't fully belong in this dimension. More followed, each ship an immense, terrifying presence, their dark, smooth exteriors reflecting no light, only shadows. These ships weren't designed to be seen, they were meant to inspire fear, to overwhelm. The fleet was vast, stretching across the sky like a swarm of locusts, blocking out the distant sunlight. Their mere arrival sent shockwaves through the fabric of space, disturbing satellites and interfering with communications. A wave of dread rolled over the Earth as these ships began to take up formation, their massive forms eclipsing entire sections of the sky. This was no invasion, it was an extermination, a force too great for any human power to stand against. Back on Earth, the first signs of chaos rippled across the globe. Satellites blinked out of existence one by one, like light bulbs flickering out in a dark room. Global communications scrambled, military channels went silent, and the International Space Station lost contact. The world watched in horror as all their systems, all their defenses, crumbled under the overwhelming might of the alien invaders. Every attempt to communicate, every desperate call for help from ground stations, was met with silence. It was as if the invaders had brought the darkness of space with them, consuming everything in their path. The military's response was slow and ineffective. Anti-air weapons that had once been tested in simulations against conventional threats were now meaningless, useless against the alien technology that dominated the skies. The human military was hopelessly outmatched, their weapons unable to even scratch the surface of the invaders' warships. The alien fleet didn't need to fire a single shot to establish complete dominance. Their mere presence was enough to send humanity into a state of helpless panic. But as chaos spread across the globe, one man remained unaffected by the panic. Elon Musk stood at the center of SpaceX Black Site 01, staring at the live feed of the alien fleet moving into formation beyond Earth's orbit. His mind was focused, cold, calculating the next steps. He knew the situation was dire, but he was not one to be swayed by fear. The fate of the world depended on his ability to think differently, to come up with something new, something that no one else could see. Despite the overwhelming odds, Elon remained calm. His eyes were fixed on the holographic projections as the fleet loomed closer. His hands were steady as he moved toward the communication panel, already planning his next move. He was used to being the one to think outside the box, to solve problems that others didn't even know existed. "Xenon," Elon said, his voice even, almost detached. "Activate Project Aegis." Xenon responded immediately, its voice steady and clear. "Project Aegis is online, Elon. Initiating countermeasures now." Elon didn't blink. He knew that Project Aegis was humanity's last hope, a defensive system designed by SpaceX, hidden from the world until now and still in its early stages. But it was their best shot at holding the line. Elon's plan wasn't perfect, it couldn't be, but it was all they had, and it had to work. Outside the facility, the world was falling apart. Emergency broadcasts blared, news channels showing footage of the massive alien warships moving across Earth's sky, the fear in the voices of the anchors clear as day. People were evacuating cities, governments were scrambling for answers, and the entire world was waiting for someone, anyone, to step up and stop the nightmare. But in the command room of SpaceX Black Site 01, the calm within Elon was absolute. There was no room for panic, no time for fear. "We can't win this long-term," Garrett's voice cracked through the silence, his face drained of color as he turned from the console. "If this doesn't work, we're done." Elon's gaze hardened, eyes flicking over the screens in front of him. The holographic projection of the alien fleet still loomed large. They were getting closer. Earth was running out of time. He looked at Garrett, then back at the screens. "Then we improvise." His voice was steady, unwavering, as if his confidence alone could change the course of history. "We're not done yet." The tension in the room was palpable, but Elon remained unshaken. He had always been the one to find a way. This time, the world was counting on him to do it again. The space station loomed above Earth, a beacon of humanity's final defense against the alien invaders. Equipped with experimental plasma cannons and kinetic railguns, it was designed to counter threats from Earth's own atmosphere, but nothing had prepared it for the alien warships now moving into low orbit. These were no conventional enemy vessels. These were colossal monoliths, black as obsidian, each one pulsing with an unnatural, foreboding glow, like a living force, drawing power from the very fabric of space. The station's weapon systems hummed to life, but as they powered up, it was clear this would not be an easy fight. Elon stood at the command center, his eyes glued to the massive projections of Earth's orbit. The station's sensors flickered in real time, mapping the alien fleet's movements, but nothing could prepare them for the scale of the oncoming assault. The first shot was fired. A plasma burst from Earth's side, bright and violent, streaking across the void and striking one of the alien ships. It collided with the enemy warship's surface, sending ripples of shockwaves through its hull. But, to Elon's horror, the alien vessel barely flinched. The alien warships had arrived, outclassing every defense humanity had in place. Their technology was far superior, and it was clear that Earth's weapons were ineffective against such a force. The moment the plasma cannon fired, the entire station seemed to hold its breath. Would it be enough? The answer came immediately, no. The alien ships retaliated, their weapon systems firing with terrifying precision. A massive energy beam shot out from one of the alien vessels, slicing through the space station's shields with ease. A sickening screech reverberated through the command center as the shields began to buckle, then fail entirely. Sparks erupted from consoles, alarms shrieking in every corner. The space station trembled under the onslaught, its outer defenses crumbling under the weight of alien firepower. The first direct hit to the station came from a smaller ship, but the power behind it was enough to send shockwaves tearing through the hull. The crew felt the tremors as they scrambled to maintain control. "We're holding them off!" Garrett shouted from the console, his voice strained, his face pale. "But more ships are arriving by the hour. We can't win this long term." The urgency in Garrett's voice was impossible to ignore, and yet Elon didn't flinch. His mind was already working, his focus locked on the holographic projections of the battle. The alien fleet wasn't just approaching. They were moving in perfect formation, overwhelming the space station from all directions. The sheer scale of the attack was beyond anything Earth had ever seen. It was no longer a matter of fighting back. It was a matter of survival. Through the windows of the command center, Elon could see the explosions of plasma fire lighting up the night sky, each one a reminder that the human race was outmatched. His heart pounded in his chest, but he remained still, locked in thought, watching the events unfold. The first sign of vulnerability was when a stray blast from the alien fleet tore through a section of the station. For a split second, the command center lights flickered and everything seemed to slow down. It was a gut-wrenching reminder that, despite the station's cutting-edge technology, they were at the mercy of a force they couldn't control. "Elon, what's the plan?" Garrett asked, his voice shaking with the pressure. But Elon remained quiet, eyes fixed on the projections of the alien warships. They were too many, and their attack patterns were too precise. The human defenses, though formidable, were now facing an enemy that didn't play by Earth's rules. The station's plasma cannons continued to fire, but it was clear this battle wouldn't be won by conventional means. Elon finally spoke, his voice calm, but his words carried the weight of a decision already made. We need to hold them off as long as we can, but we also need a new plan. Something bigger. As the space station's last-ditch efforts to defend itself continued, a chaotic dogfight erupted outside. Drones deployed, clashing against the alien vessels in a battle that was little more than a distraction. The drones, though swift and agile, were no match for the alien ship's superior shielding and weapon systems. They were shot down within seconds, leaving nothing behind but a trail of wreckage. The tension inside the command center rose with each passing moment as the defenses failed one by one. The realization hit hard. This wasn't a battle to be won. It was a battle for time. Time to find a way to break the invaders' hold before humanity was wiped out. But every passing minute felt like a ticking clock, each blast from the alien fleet pushing them closer to total destruction. Elon's thoughts snapped into focus. They needed to take a risk, to think beyond what had worked in the past. They had to find a way to use the alien technology against them, or they would lose everything. "Prepare Project Aegis," Elon ordered, his voice cutting through the chaos. The room went still and Garrett turned to Elon, eyes wide.
"You're not serious! We don't have time to deploy the full system!"
Elon's eyes locked onto Garrett's. "We don't have time not to." The next few minutes felt like hours, every second stretching into eternity as the alien ships closed in. Each blast that struck the station was a reminder that human ingenuity was the only thing standing between Earth and annihilation. But Elon was resolute. He had always believed that the impossible was just another problem waiting for a solution. And now, he had no choice but to make the impossible real. They had to buy time, and the only way to do that was to take the fight to the aliens on a level they hadn't anticipated. It was all or nothing. As the first alien warship prepared to fire its main cannon, Elon turned to face the team, his voice steady, even in the face of overwhelming odds. "We need to hold on a little longer. Let's make sure we're ready for when the real fight begins." The plan was simple, or at least it seemed that way. Head to Mars. Mars was no longer the faraway dream Elon had spent years dreaming about. It was now the key to humanity's survival. The only problem? No one, not even Elon, fully understood what they were about to unleash. Beneath the red sands of the barren planet lay a forgotten alien outpost, long abandoned by the civilization that had once used it. It was here that the master control key to the gates was hidden, and with it, perhaps humanity's final chance. But it wasn't just the technology they needed to access. The gates had been built as a fail-safe, a way to prevent something far worse than the alien fleet that now threatened Earth. The question lingered in Elon's mind. If Earth's salvation lay in activating these gates, what could possibly be worse than the destruction already unfolding in orbit? The gravity of the mission settled over him as he prepared to board the prototype interstellar ship. Time was running out, and the alien fleet was already getting dangerously close. But Mars was a risk. The ship was experimental, and no one knew how it would perform under the stresses of deep space travel, much less the hostile environment of Mars. But there was no alternative. They had to reach the alien facility and find the control key before the invaders arrived. Elon moved swiftly, directing the crew to their stations, final checks being made in silence. The air felt dense with tension. Every movement had purpose, every breath was measured. The stakes were beyond anything they had ever encountered. They were racing not just against time, but against an unknowable enemy whose power exceeded anything Earth could defend against. They were headed straight into the unknown, and with each passing second, Elon felt the weight of his decision grow heavier. Beside him, Velseer, the rogue alien who had once been part of the invading force, stood still and silent, his glowing eyes watching the preparations. Velseer had proven invaluable, the only one who truly understood the gates, their purpose, and their danger. Yet, despite his knowledge, their alliance was uneasy, fragile. Elon trusted him, but trust had been forged out of necessity, not camaraderie. "We're not gonna make it, you know," Elon said, his voice low, a wry smile pulling at his lips. The tension was mounting and he couldn't help but joke. It was his way of coping. "Space is a big place. Maybe we'll just miss Mars entirely." Velseer's expression didn't change. He didn't smile, didn't crack a joke in return. He simply looked at Elon, his gaze sharp, calculating. "You are not just fighting for Earth's survival. You are opening the gates. That will have consequences far beyond what you can imagine." Elon's gaze faltered for a moment. The reality of their mission hit him harder than he'd expected. He wasn't just trying to save Earth. He was unlocking a Pandora's box, a weapon that had been hidden away for a reason. He understood the stakes of the invasion, but this new possibility, this new danger, made everything feel so much bigger. "I know what we're doing," Elon replied, his voice steady but quieter now. "And I know the risks. But we don't have a choice. Not anymore." As the interstellar craft's engines roared to life, the vast expanse of space stretched before them. The ship surged forward, tearing through the atmosphere and into the cold void. The journey to Mars would take days, but the alien fleet's movements were too swift. They would reach Earth soon. The silence of space felt suffocating, the weight of their mission pressing in from all sides. The ship cut through the dark expanse, the stars stretching endlessly ahead. Time passed in quiet stretches, and yet, tension never eased. Elon couldn't help but wonder if the universe had a plan for this, if this was their fate. To confront something that no one could have predicted, let alone understood. As they neared Mars, he glanced at the holographic map of their route, tracking their descent. The surface of Mars appeared on the screen, its rusty, desolate surface, a far cry from the bustling planet Earth had always known. Dust storms swirled across the barren terrain, and the planet felt dead, lifeless. Yet, beneath that lifeless exterior, a forgotten alien facility awaited them, concealed by millennia of sediment and time. The secrets they needed to survive lay hidden beneath the dust, buried beneath the remains of an ancient war. As the ship broke through the Martian atmosphere, the rough terrain below began to take shape. The ancient complex they were headed for just a dot in the distance. Elon felt a sudden heaviness in his chest, the weight of their actions now more palpable than ever. They weren't just here to unlock a secret. They were about to activate the gates. A choice that could cost them everything. "Hold on tight," Elon muttered under his breath, cracking his knuckles. "We're not just looking for answers, we're opening a door." His fingers gripped the controls tighter. Velseer's voice came from beside him, calm as always, but with an edge of urgency. "You need to understand, Elon. These gates were never meant to be used by your kind. They were created as a failsafe, a weapon to contain something far worse." His eyes fixed on Elon's. "If we activate them, we risk everything." Elon glanced at the navigation screen as they began their descent toward the hidden facility beneath the Martian surface. The old alien outpost, forgotten by time, was barely visible beneath layers of sediment. They were about to open a door that had been sealed for eons. A door to something ancient, something terrifying. and they had no idea what they might find on the other side. The ship landed softly on the surface, and dust clouds kicked up as the entry ramp lowered. Elon and Veilzir stepped out into the dry Martian air, the ancient structure looming before them. Its walls were lined with glowing alien symbols, strange and incomprehensible, telling a story of a long-lost civilization, a civilization that had tried to stop something even worse than the alien fleet now threatening Earth. Elon swallowed hard as they moved deeper into the complex, the walls seemingly closing in around him. This wasn't just history. It was a warning. Veilzir pressed a hand to a control console in the center of the room, the ancient tech lighting up, responding to his touch. "This will work," he said, his voice urgent. "But once the sequence begins, we must move quickly." Elon cracked his knuckles, feeling the weight of the moment settle in. "Fast is what I do best." As the console activated, the sound of ancient machinery humming to life filled the room. The gates were about to open. And Elon knew, deep in his gut, that whatever happened next would change everything, for better or for worse. The shutdown sequence on Mars activated, and the alien fleet began to unravel as the portals across Earth destabilized. Their access points were severed, and one by one, the warships began to falter. The once formidable alien armada was now in disarray. The shockwave from the collapsing gates spread through space, and Earth's last line of defense, the SpaceX orbital station, braced for impact as the final warship charged toward them. It was too late for Earth's defenses to hold. Their last chance was hanging by a thread. The warship's cannon powered up, and the countdown to the final strike began. The station's shields were failing, the system overloaded by the force of the incoming blast. The crew, frantically scrambling to deploy the last defensive measure, had no time left. "Garrett, deploy Project Aegis," Elon commanded, his voice steady despite the chaos around them. Garrett punched in the command, and Earth's final defense activated just in time. The alien warship faltered, its systems short-circuiting as the shockwave from the collapsing gates crippled it. With a violent explosion, the warship's cannon backfired, imploding and sending ripples through the alien fleet. The remaining ships lost power and were left stranded, their firepower gone. Elon stood in the command center, watching as the last of the enemy fleet crumbled. Victory was theirs, but at a great cost. The space station was barely intact, and the damage done to Earth was only just beginning to sink in. The final battle had been won, but the war had left its scars. Garrett, eyes wide with disbelief, turned to Elon. "We did it," he said. But his voice held no joy, only the haunting realization of what they had survived. Elon didn't respond immediately. His thoughts lingered on the destruction, the loss, and the cost of their victory. The relief was short-lived. "We're not done yet," he said, his voice quiet but resolute. "We may have closed the gates, but something else might be waiting. There's always more to fight." He picked up the alien device, still faintly pulsing in his hand. "Looks like we're not done yet," he muttered, eyes reflecting the uncertainty of the future. Weeks had passed since the battle. The world had started to rebuild, but in the quiet corners of SpaceX, the scars of the war were still fresh. Elon Musk walked through the remnants of the once vibrant campus, now reduced to ruins. The wreckage of orbital debris scattered across the Arctic was a constant reminder of what humanity had just barely survived. The fragments of alien ships, smashed and twisted metal, pieces still burning with the residual heat of the destruction, sat frozen in the snow, their ominous presence an ever-present specter. Every piece of debris told a story of a battle fought to the brink, and the weight of that history hung heavy in the air. The once pristine laboratories, where innovation had flourished, now lay silent, their walls cracked and charred. The familiar hum of technology, the heartbeat of SpaceX, was replaced by an eerie stillness. In the distance, the desolate remnants of the orbital station floated in low orbit, a battered husk of its former self. The plasma cannons and kinetic railguns that had fired valiantly against the alien onslaught were now cold and useless, their power long gone. Earth had won, but it had come at a cost. The price of survival was steep. Elon moved through the wreckage, his footsteps muted against the cold, the deep silence of the post-battle world enveloping him. His mind, once teeming with plans and ideas, now felt strangely distant. There was no rush, no next big thing to chase. The war had taken its toll, not just on Earth, but on him. But as he walked through the ruins, something caught his eye. Amidst the scattered debris, something pulsed faintly, its glow weak but persistent. He kneeled down, brushing aside the cold remains of a fallen satellite, revealing a small alien device. It was smooth, its surface dark and sleek, unlike anything humans had ever designed. Its faint glow pulsed rhythmically, and though it seemed abandoned, it was still transmitting a signal into deep space. Elon stared at it for a long moment, the realization settling in. They weren't done yet. The battle was over, yes, but this device, this mystery, meant that the conflict wasn't truly finished. The gates had been shut, the alien fleet had been stopped, but the universe was vast, and there was always something more lurking in the dark. The device was a reminder that this war was just the beginning, that Earth had been marked by forces far beyond what they could comprehend. For a long time, Elon simply stared at the device. His mind replayed the final moments of the battle, the destruction of the alien fleet, the collapse of the portals, the silence that followed. For a moment, there had been peace, a brief respite. But this small, pulsing device, transmitting a signal to who knows where, changed everything. A slow smile spread across his face, a smirk that had become almost instinctual to him. It wasn't relief, it wasn't joy, it was something else. A reminder that no matter how many battles were won, there would always be another fight. There would always be more to do. As he picked up the device, his fingers brushing against the smooth surface, he felt a sense of resolve deep within him. There was no time for complacency, no time to rest. The fate of humanity was never going to be simple. It was always going to require more effort, more sacrifice, more ingenuity than he ever thought possible. And no matter the cost, Elon Musk had made peace with the truth. There would always be another challenge. As he stood up, the weight of the device in his hand, the world around him still healing from the war they had just fought, Elon's mind was already racing forward. There were questions to be answered, mysteries to unravel. What was this device really doing? Who was it calling? And why had it been left behind? The stars stretched above him, silent and indifferent, but beneath them, Elon Musk was far from finished. The smirk on his face grew into something more determined, a promise to himself and to humanity. The fight was far from over. Well, he muttered to himself, glancing up at the stars, looks like we're not done yet.